Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our times with huge geopolitical implications. And when we talk about developing countries, of course, developing countries are disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change. And when we talk about Pakistan, Pakistan ranks on around 87.83 out of 100 on the climate risk index. When we talk about climate change, of course, this is a transnational issue, and of course, the impacts of climate change are noticed from across nations and have regional as well as global impacts. They spill over from one nation to the other. That is why this is an issue that is of significance for the globe. And climate and environmental diplomacy plays an important role in raising voices regarding the climate change issues that are impacting global south largely. In today's program, we will be talking about the huge consequences of climate change and also the geopolitical and security dimensions that are linked with climate change and how environmental diplomacy can be effectively implied and applied in this regard. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Munir Ahmad, who is environmental activist. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Dr. Sohail Yousaf, who is environmental expert. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by Dr. Derk Becker, who is environmental expert. Welcome to the program. So, Mr. Munir, let me start with you. Of course, when we talk about environmental issues, how do you see Pakistan's vulnerability to climate change has evolved over the years? And in your opinion, what are some of the key issues regarding climate that Pakistan is facing today?
A very complex question that you have asked about a very complex phenomenon of climate change. In fact, the environmental degradation in Pakistan at a peak. And recently we have seen several videos coming out from the communities that they have played with the forests of Pakistan, especially in KP and Gilgit-Baltistan. And secondly, the main issue that we are facing, that is the carbon emissions that coming out of vehicles and industry, though we are not a big industry and our contribution is not more than 1%.
But it's 0.09%.
Still, the carbon emissions that we emit and the environmental degradation that we do have multiplied the climate impact in the local areas, causing disasters, global phenomena in the mountains, and heat waves, that is the regional and transboundary phenomena that we have seen over the years, and also the heavy monsoon rains causing flash floods. Last year that we have seen what kind of floods that we faced, $30 billion loss, and again, like there are so many issues has emerged over these years. Our vulnerability at this time, at this moment, has gone up to on the 5th. We are ranked in most of the reports as the 5th most vulnerable country. And in terms of water scarcity, we are the 3rd top vulnerable country. And the reports say that by 2025, just like next year, we'll be facing, or we will start facing, acute shortage of water. So these are the things. And on the other hand, we have been facing heat waves in the winter season.
True.
And this year we have been facing a longer extreme weather of winter and the harsh summer season. So a harsh monsoon. These are all the we say the indicators of the phenomena. And the second question you asked, that environmental diplomacy, and we have been wonderful in raising voice on it, and the loss and damage fund
in
was
COP27.
Pakistan's
Yes,
that was Pakistan's
initiative,
diplomacy
of course.
that basically culminated to the establishment of loss and damage fund.
Right. Munir sab, we'll be discussing about environmental diplomacy later in the program in depth. But Dr. Sohail, when we talk about these huge issues that have, of course, security dimensions as well, how do you see Pakistan's limited capacity to respond to these environmental issues has made it more vulnerable as compared to other nations?
Pakistan, as we know, is a developing country, and it does not have the resources to combat the climate change and the issues which are actually related with the climate. We see that in Pakistan, more than 67% population is dependent on agriculture, and agriculture is backbone of Pakistan's industry. And when we talk about climate change, the one sector that is affected very badly is the agriculture, because climate change, either it has a rise in temperature that we call about the heat waves, and then as a result of rise in temperature, we will have floods, or we will have drought and heat waves. And when we have floods, then the agriculture, there is a damage of the agricultural crops and livestock. And then on the other hand, if we have droughts and heat waves, then we face a reduction in the crop yield and productivity. So we need more resilient crops to combat. So these are the things which actually add up to the vulnerability of Pakistan towards the climate change. And it affects the food security in Pakistan. It adds to the poverty in the Pakistan, and all the plans which we are making to to reduce the poverty, and they are badly damaged by these climate related events.
Right, but Dr. Sohail, this is alarming that Pakistan ranks 5th in most vulnerable countries of the world. So do you think that it has mostly to do with global north contributing to these climate changes, or it is Pakistan's own limited capacity that has contributed to our increased vulnerability to these climate changes?
Actually both. I would say that like the contribution of Pakistan towards climate change and greenhouse gas emissions is not so significant. But on the other hand, your capacity, that if there is a disaster, what is your preparedness towards this risk and disaster management? So we lack in that, and the major reason for that is our economic situation. That our infrastructure is not climate resilient. As we know that most of the population, like Sir has mentioned, in the floods of 2022, 33 million people were affected and 8 million were displaced. And we saw that for 3 to 4 months we could not even get rid of the water that was standing in different areas, and it
because one-third of the country was submerged in water, of course.
So this shows our deficiency to respond to the damages which occur due to the climate change.
So capacity building is another factor.
Yes.
Munir sir, what do you
in
want
my point of view is we definitely we are short of funds. We have lack of capacity. But what else we have? We have wonderful policies, and we were among the first countries in the South Asia having climate change policies. But after the 18th Amendment, the major issue is enforcement of the policies at the local level. That is the major issue, right from the vulnerable districts to the national level. But the response is also quite well. But unfortunately, repeatedly the same districts are suffered, and because of the same causes. That is that shows the lack of enforcement, and we could not convince our communities and people that please don't do these things. We have to focus on the things that we shall not do.
Of course, we will be talking about awareness and the role of these non-state actors like NGOs regarding education and awareness of the communities. But Dr. Derk, when we talk about countries like Pakistan being more vulnerable, although they are contributing less, can you explain us the concept of climate justice and how does it applies to Pakistan and other developing countries that are suffering from these impacts of the climate change?
Justice as a concept, the way I understand it would be that other countries who are predominantly responsible for a lot of the emissions of carbon dioxide would be contributing to the cost and the burden, or carrying the burden that is imposed on countries that are less well off. So in that way, climate justice would be carried out in a financial way or in an economical sense. So it would be sharing the burden or carrying the burden that at the moment is carried by many of the vulnerable countries, including Pakistan. So, and that would have to come from developing countries like America and China and Europe and so on, that should be helping out in a country like Pakistan to adapt to all the measures that are needed to combat climate change.
Right, and what role does environmental diplomacy plays in that regard? Because most of the developed countries, although they are contributing to these climate change impacts, but of course there's a lot of resistance when contributing towards the funds that are being established after COP28. So what role can environmental diplomacy in countries like Pakistan can play?
Oh, yeah, you're dealing with global efforts there that indeed, are hitting the hip pocket, and in that way, a lot of diplomacy would be required of a very skillful type diplomat who would be able to highlight the needs of countries like Pakistan in front of an audience that is governing the world in terms of the bigger economies, and these bigger economies are not directly willing to carry the burden with countries like Pakistan, because it's not just climate change, obviously, that Pakistan is dealing with. The interactions with the IMF might be related to climate change, but it's not a direct focus on it. So you almost would have to look at climate change as a completely separate issue, addressing very typical issues that are related to the consequences of climate change, and address and seek funding and resources to help. Help in those areas, and that's not an easy task, because Pakistan is obviously very well known on the international scene of dealing with IMF and many other donor countries, but now it comes to climate change, it's again at a different level. So it wouldn't be easy. I mean, the COPs that we've had, the last one in Dubai or UAE, was one of those areas where Pakistan obviously can make some inroads, and I think there is a general willingness among developing countries to contribute, but of course they have their own issues, and not everyone likes to part with their money just like that. So quite a bit of skillful negotiation would be required.
A lot of pledges were made, Dr. Derk. We will be talking about those pledges and dissemination and what role can environmental diplomacy played? But of course, Mr. Munir, you were earlier talking about the role of communities in all that. So firstly, can you tell us the impacts of this climate migration on overall security, environment and community dynamics, and what role can countries and of course organizations or climate activists like yourself can play to of course influence those communities and to better equip them to deal with the impacts of climate change?
First of all, certainly there is the role of communities and the community activists and those who are advocating to raise awareness about the climate impacts. But the most important factor is the enforcement by the authorities, the role they can play in implementing the legislation, whatever they have made, and the frameworks. That is very important. Community activists cannot replace the role of the authorities that have. That is the first thing we need to understand. And afterwards, I don't know what vaccine should be invented to educate and make the people aware of the disasters they would be facing. I think the words have gone waste. So far.
What is the reason
And
of
this
so
is
much resistance from the communities? Because of course they don't want to leave their homes and they don't have alternate for of course staying in. So what do you think is the reason for so much resistance, that they are putting their own lives at risk?
In fact, they are more attached sometimes to their native villages, to their parental lands, but they are not aware of. They will migrate when the disaster is there, but after the disaster is past, gone, and they will go back to the same place and do the same practices. And unfortunately,
can you tell us about some of the practices that are causing disaster to the climate in these communities? And also, do you think that infrastructure development is also an issue in these communities, because the direction in which the urban development has been done is causing resistance in the flow of water and other issues?
You have talked about three things. First, the infrastructure. Certainly, the infrastructure is not resilient, one thing. The infrastructure is not at the place where it should be. They have crossed the boundary lines and they have disturbed the nature. For example, the last floods that emerged from Savat, and we saw many hotels and the guest houses were wiped off because they were on the edge of the river. They have not observed the instructions were given by the authorities. Thirdly, the mafias type things, it is very phenomenal in our lives. And if we go to the places, we see they have cut the forest that has added more to the vulnerability.
Deforestation is
and
an issue.
Deforestation. Secondly, if you go to Savat, you will see like the entire river belt has been wiped off of all the trees have cut, and the stones, though they were stopping the water coming out of its boundaries. They have over 170 stone crushing machines are working over there, and same is the case in our Atak vicinity. We have seen the many stone crushing machines in Pathargarh and the other adjacent areas. So these are the policies, and the KP government issued licenses to those stone crushing, and then they took back when the action, the voice was raised by the communities. So I believe the voice of communities and the activists plays a pivotal role in stopping such kind of phenomena. But unfortunately, the mafias, those who are the culprits, they are equipped with weapons, and the forest guards and the community activists, they cannot do the justice with batons or the sticks they have, or just simply raising their voices. Until the voice goes to the higher authorities, maybe to the President House or the Prime Minister's Secretariat. Until then, the damage has done, rather the devastation has done. So we need to equip and integrate certain systems of communication from the far-flung communities where our nature treasure lie. So they could immediately communicate, and they should also be, such forceful to combat the mafias. Or those,
Right.
the culprits.
Point
Yeah.
well taken. So, Dr. Sohail, when we talk about Pakistan, of course, different areas and different regions of Pakistan are impacted by very divergent impacts of the climate change. Like when we look at Balochistan, it is hit by drought, while in Sindh and Punjab we have floods. So, what do you think are the reasons of these drastic climate impacts? And also, do you think that Pakistan's reliance on fossil fuels is also one of the issue that Pakistan is facing this diverse impacts of climate change?
On one side, we are blessed that we have a diversified land, and we always claim that we have 4 seasons in Pakistan, and it's very rare in the world. If we
Now
look
the
at-
seasons are also reduced to 2.
This diversification is actually a blessing for Pakistan. But you are right that there is a variation in the impacts of the climate in different areas. What we have seen in the past 20 to 30 years, the events have been more harsh. They are, but on the other hand, if we see that, like if we talk about the precipitation, we see the events of precipitation are very hard, and we see more precipitation and heavy rainfalls. But if we look at the data in the last 20 years, in rain-fed regions, in arid regions of Pakistan, there is a decline of 10 to 15%, and same is with the coastal areas. Pakistan, in Balochistan, we have faced a drought for 5 years from 1997 to 2002, and then again in 2014 and 2015. So this is one thing we should understand, that these climatic variations, they have different impacts. Like in glaciers, we face the more melting of the glaciers, and that results in the flash flooding or riverine flooding in the other areas. But if there are less rains, like in Balochistan and some areas of Sindh, then we see the drought. So the point is that we need to make the policies according to this. We should understand that this increase in temperature, a global warming, is resulting in melting of glaciers and more water in the rivers and floods we are experiencing. But after 20 to 30 years, these all glaciers will be disappeared, or major part of will be lost, and then we will face the drought, and that is more, I think drought is more terrible than these, and we are in a water stressed countries, and this will lead to water scarcity. So we need to make the policies today to understand that how we can counter these climatic variations and their damages on different areas. But because we will face different, we will have floods, or we will have droughts, or we have heat waves. So we need to make the policy
And
like
when we talk about these policies, Dr. Sohail, do you think that reliance on fossil fuels has been one of the issues? And of course, being in the economic challenges that Pakistan is facing today, the transition to smart technologies is a challenge for Pakistan at this point in time.
Yeah, this is a complex issue. Actually, we see the nations who are not developed, all the development they have actually obtained through the use of fossil fuels. But now, since Pakistan is a developing country, our 60% reliance of energy resources is on the fossil fuels.
Right.
So there is a need to switch to the renewable energy.
Right.
We have to, but that needs what we are calling about this environmental diplomacy. So we will need the support from the developed nations. One is this financial, that is difficult, financial aid that we get.
Because we will be needing the infrastructure for
infrastructural,
those
yes, and
energy
technological.
transitions, of course.
Actually, we need training, and we need technological support to build, because the initial investment in these renewable resources is very high. So if we do not have the resources, then it will be difficult for Pakistan to switch to the renewable resources. On the other hand, we are paying the more cost of the energy as compared to the other nations in our surrounding. It means this is not only polluting and damaging our environment, but it is also damaging the pocket of the people. We are paying the more cost than the other nations in our surroundings.
And of course, Mr. Munir, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, our fossil fuel use is much lesser than India and China, as compared to India and China. But now new technologies have come up, and there is a zigzag technology. There was a project in Sindh, charcoal was being used in using the new technology, and the greenhouse gas emissions were much lesser. Rather, they call it zero carbon emissions because of that technology. But I believe, I agree to Dr. Sohail that we need to switch over to renewable energy. There is a scope of 43,000 megawatt of solar energy. If we just harness the potential of
and nuclear energy is also an alternate.
Oh yeah, that is the alternate. Then certainly we don't need to exploit the coal and use it. And on the other, this second phenomena is very important, that we are importing the second-hand technology in Pakistan.
True.
And that is also a cause. And now we are coming up with the smart agriculture and smart technology solutions. We are just thinking of it now.
Right.
And we are, we have signed like couple of agreements with China and Korea and those. But I believe in the next couple of years, we will be transforming our energy into more climate-friendly practices, and agriculture will be more climate resilient as well.
Right. Right, of course. And Dr. Derk, when we talk about this concept of new climate economy, we have been hearing a lot of noise after COP26 and in COP27 and of course in COP28 as well. Do you think that developing countries like Pakistan can also reap benefits of these new climate economies? And can you give us some of the examples of the countries in the world where these, of course, environmental friendly and climate smart technologies have already been applied?
The way Pakistan would be benefiting from climate economies is solely through the climate funds that have been established over the last few COPs. So that's certainly a source of potential funding for renewable energies, perhaps, or at least funding for less carbon-intensive technologies and approaches. The way Europe is particularly developing, where low-carbon technology is just going ahead in leaps and bounds, solely with the reduction of gas flowing from Russia since the Ukrainian war started, that they have been forced to very quickly start focusing on renewables that are much less dependent on these fossil fuels. So and then that's certainly developing a new economy, in the sense that new initiatives are being funded. The very large emphasis on electrification of the society, whether that is through adoption of electric vehicles or no gas connections anymore in new houses. And I'm familiar with developments like that in Victoria and Australia, where new houses will not be equipped with gas connections anymore, and for that matter in the Netherlands as well, in Europe. So these climate economies, if you can call it that way, is a new way of looking where the focus is very much shifting towards much less carbon intensive options rather than just relying on the oil, gas, and coal type options that we have had for such a long time. So new climate
Right, of course, and it is
economies.
important to reduce the carbon footprint as well, Dr. Derk. But at the same time, are there some economic opportunities also linked to these climate smart economies? And how do you think that countries like Pakistan can maximize their benefits and can transition to these climate smart technologies and or towards the climate smart economy?
Yeah, I think there's certainly an opportunity there because in many ways carbon certainly in Europe has got a price tag. So as soon as you move into that sphere of dealing with carbon economies, the carbon needs to be valued. And at the moment, that's not really happening in Pakistan. So if you want
and in
to...
your opinion, what are some of the barriers because of that not happening in Pakistan? What are the basic hurdles in your opinion?
Well, an hurdle would be or not having access to a carbon market in such way that we have access to financial markets. In Europe, you have a carbon market. So carbon has got a price tag, and that's not the case here at the moment. So if we move towards that, obviously through a government initiative where carbon can be traded, carbon credits can be obtained or bought or sold, that would make a massive difference in the way industrialists would look at their emissions and where governments would be looking at initiatives that can be taken to take into account the carbon story. At the moment, it's just based on feel good and trying to walk the way that everyone tells us that we should be walking. Whereas once you move into a carbon economy, there is a financial trade-off, there is a financial benefit, or obviously in disadvantage as well. But a tradable commodity like carbon can be certainly move Pakistan in that direction, but it needs a lot of guidance from certainly from a federal level.
Right. And Mr. Munir, in your opinion, how can Pakistan balance the commitments to reducing these, of course, greenhouse emissions with its energy needs? Because, of course, we have energy needs and we don't have that infrastructure. So, more than 60% we are reliant on fossil fuels like coal and other such sources.
In fact, we have to go, for example, the low carbon appliances at homes, the first thing. The most important thing is that we have not tapped all the renewable energy resources, as I mentioned about the solar. And for this, I believe we really don't need too much money to do it. If we go for green financing and we would ask our banks to give loans on easy installments to the public with nominal rates of interest on it, we can supply the solar panels to every household. The second thing the government can do is develop solar energy parks for the villages and such towns. And they would replace, our metering system of that we have the WAPDA and those thermal or the other fossil fuel based energy system. And the other thing that we have, we are more than 70% of Pakistan is the rural area, and there is the more possibility of biogas plants. And now we have more efficient technology of biogas plants. So these tapping these like alternate resources of energy would help. And third most important thing is that we always keep on stressing, advocating the climate phenomena in Pakistan, we never, or like much less, we talked about our issues in the foreign media. And that can also play a very important role. We have external publicity wing with under the Ministry of Information, and we shall assign them a role. Those Pakistanis living in foreign countries, and mostly the journalists and the community leaders, they should be projecting our case over there consistently, so that we could get enough share from the Green Climate Fund and from the Loss and Damage Fund.
Right.
So the consistent diplomacy through community leaders, the expats, Pakistani expats living there, and especially the Pakistani journalists living in other countries and working with the international media.
Right.
So they can play a very vigorous role to get funding or the good pie from the Green Climate Fund and a Loss and Damage Fund, and then that can be used for climate resilient infrastructures in the far-flung areas or in the communities. They are vulnerable, especially Balochistan and the northern areas and the parts of KP and the Sindh and Punjab. So we have to, we have rather spotted out the vulnerable districts, and they should be more focused, and the enforcement of laws.
Right.
So
very,
I believe
very pertinent point
very
that
pertinent.
you alluded to earlier
if we
as
have
well.
wonderful policies, and if they are not forcefully implemented,
right?
you will not get
Implementation
it.
is the key.
So these are the 4 or 5 points
that
if you go for it, you will have certainly not in years, just in months you will see. For example, if you start implementing, taking measures of, as I mentioned, in few months you would see the difference.
Right. So lastly, Dr. Sohail, in your opinion, how can Pakistan further strengthen its ties with multilateral organizations and climate activists, like, of course, engaged climate activists like Munir Saab, to advance its case and to enhance the environmental diplomacy?
Yeah, I think what we need to do in Pakistan is, first of all, that education and awareness. That is not at the level of government or the organizations, but at the level of the community, and we should start it from the primary stage. That people should understand that we are facing a climate change, and it is actually damaging us. So we need to be prepared for this. So in that, I see that if we are educated well and we understand that what is the sustainable development, what is the sustainable infrastructure, and then we can advocate at the higher levels, and then we can we have to do it ourselves first, and then we can ask for the support from the developed countries who have already addressed these issues. For example, if we can ask them to help us in building the renewable resources, then they would be happy to see if we are actually ourselves doing some points, we have achieved some milestones. So like we have to do a better water management. We are not recycling wastewater. So we are wasting a lot of water. We are extracting a lot of water from the ground to fulfill our needs.
Right.
So our population is growing. So our dependency on the resources and exploitation of the resources is increasing. So we need to understand that these issues first have to be addressed by ourselves, and then we can engage. Of course, then the private sector has to play a role in it. Different NGOs, they are playing a role. Not only they can bring the investment as well, but they can actually educate and convey our message to the international community.
Of course, and that's where environmental diplomacy comes in. Yes. Lastly, just briefly.
Just a couple of sentences on it. When I was a school child, I was hearing environmental awareness. And I think right from early 90s to onward, we are more focusing on environmental awareness. Now we have go to, again, I would say, the enforcement. And we need to, as Dr. Sohail mentioned, we are over-exploiting the resources. We have to attach some fine system. We have to impose heavy fines on those
Right,
who are
right,
exploiting resources.
Point well taken. Thank you very much, Mr. Munir Ahmad, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Sohail Yousaf, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Derk Becker, for joining us in today's program. Of course, as we conclude today's program, we know that climate change challenges are huge, but at the same time, there are a number of opportunities as well that we need to exploit. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.